Welcome, everybody. I'm Dr. Howard Koh, a professor here at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. It's my great pleasure to moderate today's event entitled Cultivating Compassion Strategies for Bullying Prevention. And we're doing this event in collaboration with the American Repertory Theater, A.R.T, at Harvard. In this session, we're going to be exploring the power of compassion and inclusion in the face of bullying. And it's inspired by a new musical that's premiering at the A.R.T next week on December 10th. That musical is called Wonder. And we believe that the themes from this musical and from the arts overall can be and should be applied to public health. So to drill down on this fascinating topic, we have three wonderful colleagues on this panel. To my immediate right, Sarah Ruhl, the playwright of Wonder, the musical that I just described. Then to her right, Jason Vogler, who's a child psychologist at Boston Children's Hospital, an associate professor at Harvard Medical School. And to his right, Ari Ne'eman, assistant professor of health policy and management at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. So Sarah, let's start with you. Can you give us a brief overview of the story of Wonder and what inspired you to write this story?
Yeah. So Wonder is the story of a little boy named Auggie who has a profound facial difference, and he's been homeschooled his whole life, and his mother thinks it's time for him to go to school. So the book follows his first year in school, and he's bullied, but he does make a really important friend named Jack. And I don't want to spoil the story for you, but it's really about how he ultimately acquires an incredible amount of resilience. One thing I also love about the book is it's a portal for empathy through other characters' points of view as well. So we talk about the sister, we look at the mother's point of view. I think a lot of literature now does this, takes different chapters with different point of views, but I think when RJ first wrote this book, it was quite unique. Speaking for me personally, I read the book when I had 3 kids under the age of 3. I had twins, and after I gave birth, I had paralysis of my 7th cranial nerve, which is otherwise known as Bell's palsy. I'm sure there are neurologists around this building who know what it is. For me, it was the nerve was completely frozen, and I had trouble growing back. So there were often times where strangers couldn't register my facial expression. I felt I couldn't smile at my babies. People thought I was grimacing when I was actually smiling. So this sort of 10-year journey with facial difference for me made me know what it is to try to be expressing something on your face and not have it be received, which is really different from Auggie's journey. Obviously, it's congenital and more extreme, but I just felt like I had never seen someone with facial difference at the center of a story, and the way that RJ puts Auggie there. And I think that one thing, speaking about public policy, that I think is amazing is the nurse who was working with us. We worked with Matthew Jaffe and a nurse and the My Face community, an advocacy group. And the nurse who worked in the NYU craniofacial unit said for her there was a pre-Wonder and there was an after Wonder. And that before Wonder, kids who were in her unit didn't want to go to school because they were bullied. After Wonder, there was much less bullying in her school. Or sorry, not in her school, in their schools. So I thought that was an incredible statement about the power and the impact that the arts can have on the everyday lives of readers.
Thank you, Sarah. That's so moving. You know, so often what we do professionally is inspired by our personal experiences, so you captured that beautifully. So Jason, welcome. As Sarah has already said several times, Auggie is bullied by other kids, and that's a theme throughout the whole musical and play. And you're a professional. What do we know about the lasting impacts of bullying, particularly on young kids with disabilities?
No, thanks for asking that. They're very serious. I think many of us grew up in an era where there was a sitcom episode, the bullying episode, and we grew up thinking of it as this unpleasant but normal rite of passage. The reality is very serious. The CDC in 2019 and 2020, so back when we weren't so worried about what they were saying, they confirmed that bullying is an adverse childhood experience, meaning that it has deleterious effects on neurodevelopment, on health. It can lead to metabolic disorders, cardiovascular disorders, learning problems, executive functioning problems. So bullying is every bit as toxic as neglect, as abuse, as having an incarcerated family member. It is incredibly serious, and the fact that this musical is shining a light on it is powerful. Thank you for that.
So what you're implying here, Jason, is that these aren't short-term outcomes, that these are long-term mental health outcomes that we talk about.
Through the lifespan.
Wow.
And many of you probably are familiar with the ACEs pyramid that's become sort of household, with this idea that the adverse experiences lead to health problems, but also to compensatory behaviors. Smoking and substance use and overeating and compounding can lead to earlier mortality. Right, but this is not light stuff. Bullying's every bit as serious a public health issue as anything else out there.
And I have had mental health professionals teach me, actually, that adults walk around with this trauma for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And so these adverse experiences are very impactful and very much a public health issue for all of us, right? So Ari, welcome. And we know that in Wonder, Auggie is afraid of showing his face because he looks different and struggles to fit in. So tell us from your point of view how narratives in the theater and media shape public attitudes about disabilities.
Well, I think narrative is really critical, both to counter stigma, but also sometimes it can serve to inadvertently reinforce it. I came to the play and to this discussion really from two lenses. First, as someone who's married to someone with a facial difference, albeit a different one than Augie's. And also, as an autistic person who had the experience growing up in grade school of coming to my neighborhood school after having been excluded from it in a special education school for a number of years. And one of the things that for both my wife and I, in talking about these childhood experiences, that really just continues to come up is the extent to which the problems of condescension and paternalism are in some respects just as big and perhaps even quite larger problems than out-and-out cruelty. And from that perspective, I guess I would offer a respectful critique of Wonder, which I think is put together both the play and the book with the very best of intentions. But there is a problem, and it's a problem that's not limited to this particular play, but it shows up in almost all of our representation of disability in popular culture. Disabled people very frequently are presented as objects of inspiration or charity whose primary narrative function in art and media is their impact on the non-disabled people around them. And that's something that comes about because I think our culture looks at disability as a very extreme experience, and so something that they hope to draw broader insights from. But because for disabled people it's simply a day-to-day experience, it can serve to exceptionalize. So in reading Wonder, I found myself really wishing that Auggie had had the agency or interiority or narrative arc that, say, his sister got. His sister's narrative rings so true as this common experience of siblings, non-disabled siblings, of disabled children, of feeling overshadowed, or as parents got, where there was, again, a fundamental truth about the anxiety that parents frequently have in sending their kids to school. Auggie is largely acted upon. He seems to exist in the narrative for the purpose of experiencing cruelty, experiencing some level of resilience, and providing forgiveness. But he doesn't really have any kind of agency or narrative arc akin to some of the other main characters. So that, to me, is a problem. I think we do run this risk that with narratives like this, which are not specific to Wonder, but just pervade how we talk about disability, that disabled people end up being seen by our peers as objects of charity or objects of inspiration. And we can say charity and inspiration are good things, but who wants to be an object?
So in your view, Ari, how do we counter stigma then?
So I think there are two possibilities when we talk about narratives. One is we need to see more disabled characters in stories in which disability that are not primarily about disability. And that's something we don't see very much in movies and television. There's this problem of, I sometimes call it very special episode syndrome. A TV show contracts a disabled character, they teach everyone a valuable lesson, and then they disappear. So we need people to just be present, and their disability is a part of who they are, but it's not the totality of who they are. The other thing that we need, and this goes in the opposite direction, is we need stories that do center disability, but center the experiences of disabled people. And to be frank, the challenges that disabled people face are not simply a matter of cruelty. They're often a matter of paternalism. And it's often, the challenges that people face are often just as much a matter of the people around them acting, again, with the best of intentions, but out of a belief that the best way to protect someone is to segregate them, is to limit their opportunities to interact with the broader world. I don't think we have enough narratives that are fundamentally about capturing that more nuanced and complex aspect of the disabled experience in our culture.
Okay, very complex issue, so many themes to explore, and it's a discussion that evolves, so that's one reason why we're having a panel like this. And so, by the way, the beauty of having a discussion about a musical is that you can stop and see a clip from a musical, so we're going to do that right now. We're going to listen to a song from Wonder, written by Ian Axel and Chad King, performed by Allison Luff, and the song is called You Are Beautiful. So let's play the tape.
I still remember the day I first looked in those eyes, big as the ocean. Your little fingers all wrapped around mine, and my heart exploding wide open. You are beautiful, each and every one of your scars tells a story of a boy who's strong and brave. I hope you know you are beautiful, brighter than a sky full of stars. Oh, Auggie, what a wonder you are. You see this wrinkle right here, and this mark on my chin, and all the gray hairs I'm growing. This is a map showing where we have been, and our hearts show us where we are going. You are beautiful, each and every one of your scars tells a story of a boy who's stronger than he'll ever know. You are beautiful, brighter than a sky full of stars. Oh, Auggie, what a wonder you are. And I know it may seem that life can be mean, that you're in a bad dream and it's hard to wake up. But just look at me now, you know you're allowed to be
Oh, moving song. So, Sarah, please comment on not just the song, but overall, how do we use the theater and the media to build empathy and promote public health messaging?
Well, that was one of the first songs that Chad and Ian wrote, and I wish they were here to talk to us today, too. And I know Chad and Ian both have deep feelings about being part of the disability community. Chad has MS and talks at great length about making the arts more accessible. And I agree with what you said about putting more disabled stories front and center, where disability is maybe not the first thing you know about a person, but the sixth or seventh. That story was that song was one of the first songs they wrote, and it comes out of a moment where the mother runs in after Augie's first day of school and asks how your day was, and he quickly cuts a braid off of his hair that's like a Star Wars Padawan braid, and he's become ashamed of it because somebody has made fun of him. And I think the moms who have brought their kids to be in this show, I hang out with them a lot in the green room, and it's been really beautiful to hear their experiences with their kids. And this is the first time that the book and the movie, this third instantiation is the first time we've had actors playing Auggie who have facial differences. So Garrett has Treacher Collins, and his understudy Max has bilateral cleft palate. And the mom's telling the story of them auditioning and getting the roles and being put front and center when they've been sidelined in so many stories, even though Augie's experience resonates a lot for them, has been incredibly moving. And what's also been beautiful is seeing the community that the kids have created together, just a really loving, supportive community of kids. And I think part of that is the message of the book is choose kind. So there's something about when you set a tone for public health, or you set a tone for a classroom, or you set a tone for a rehearsal room, you come in and say, you're going to be more kind than necessary today. You're going to be compassionate. It does attract a certain kind of person. And just to give you one example, this kid, Reese, who plays the bully Julian, Reese is a really sweet kid, and you'd never think of him as a bully. He has like type 1 diabetes and has to like eat a Skittles every so often. If his blood sugar goes down, he's freckles. And he has to say some horrible things in the play to Auggie. And Matthew Jaffe, our consultant, came in one day and said, how has this piece already changed you? And Reese raised his hand. And he said, it's changed me because I really realized that my voice can create harm. If my voice says certain words, it creates harm. And he started crying. And he said, so I feel very careful when I get off that stage. I do a little ritual, or I snap when I come off, so that like my normal self returns.
Thank you, Sarah. Such moving insights. Thank you so much. So Ari and Jason, let's move a little more about creating more inclusive communities, not just in schools, but for society at large. How do we do that? Ari, you want to start with this one?
Sure. Bob Bergdorf, who was one of the authors of the Americans with Disabilities Act, he has this wonderful phrase, charity may be the highest of virtues, but sometimes it's no substitute for a court order, which is to say that we have a real problem with civil rights enforcement of our disability rights laws in this country. And of course, last year or so, it's gotten considerably worse for reasons that I think people are very aware of. There's been a gutting of the civil rights enforcement apparatus of the federal government. But frankly, it wasn't very good beforehand. So if we look at the rates at which children with disabilities are included in the general education classroom alongside their non-disabled peers, and the federal government collects this data, there are huge differences from state to state. And in fact, what's kind of interesting is it's not actually corresponding to the usual state-to-state differences that we think of. We usually think the red states are doing much worse, the blue states are doing much better. It's really not on that axis. What we've seen very frequently is oftentimes the states that built special education infrastructure in an earlier generation, some of which were being very progressive in doing so in the 1950s and 60s, really got sort of stuck in a status quo where the expectation is, okay, the disabled children, they go to that special school. We don't deal with them here. We deal with them in that separate place. And so there's a need for us to really use public policy to create an expectation of greater educational inclusion and to create an expectation of greater inclusion in the adult world as well, of expanding access to home and community-based services, of dealing with the fact that for many people with disabilities, nursing homes and other institutions continue to be a setting of incredible segregation when people could be supported in the broader community. These are problems, first and foremost, of public policy, and I think social change follows from getting people interacting with disabled people in day-to-day life on equal terms.
Thank you for doing work in this very important area, Ari. And Jason, tell us how you would create more inclusive communities here.
So we have some reasons for hope. So Mass was the first state to enact an anti-bullying law in 2010 after the Phoebe Prince tragedy. In 2012, it was given more teeth, thankfully. We have more of a process now. So this is channeling my colleague, Peter Rafali of the Bullying and Cyberbullying Prevention and Advocacy Collaborative at Boston Children's Hospital. Wonderful resource. He would completely celebrate what you're saying about creating respectful spaces and that it happens from the top. That the first day you come to school, there is an attitude of inclusion, there is an attitude of respect. There are wonderful websites out there, Understanding Our Differences, stopbullying.gov. The problem arises when it's this secret we need to keep in-house because we don't want to get sued. It needs to be quite the opposite of that. It needs to be a culture of respect and protection, of restorative justice. Peter Rafali would be the first to say, right, bullies are kids too. And he would have compassion for Julian. And yes, Julian needs to know you cannot do that to somebody, but also try to figure out why, right? It's not, interestingly enough, right, Julian has a learning disability in this play. Having neurodevelopmental differences puts you on a trajectory, puts you at risk to be more likely to be a bully or a victim or a reactive victim bully, right? Someone who takes it and then lashes out. If we think about all these kids as a population in need, there's a lot of good we can do. But it has to start from the top, absolutely.
That's fascinating. Jason, tell us more about Phoebe Prince.
Phoebe Prince tragically was relentlessly bullied. It's kind of when cyberbullying came to prominence, this idea that she was at first befriended by a friend group and they turned on her. And it wasn't just the public things that a school might see, but the texting and doing terrible things to her on social media, which was relatively novel back then. And so part of the giving the anti-bullying law more teeth was to also look at cyberbullying. And this idea of even if it's not going on in our school walls, if it's affecting your ability to learn, if it's affecting your ability to function, it's our problem. We need to deal with it too, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and that's going to involve everybody, right? Whether
Absolutely.
we realize it or not, the way things are going. So thank you. So Sarah, you've already mentioned a couple times that Wonder not only featured actors with craniofacial differences, but you also worked with consultants with lived experience, and that was really important to creating the show in the first place. Do you want to expand on why those two themes were very, very important here for Wonder?
Well, they were completely central and completely important, and everything kind of led out from there. I can't stop myself from asking you a question though, just as a parent.
Good. Go.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So I have 3 kids, and I know bullying policy has changed since the 70s when I was a kid and bullied. But one thing that I think hasn't changed is parents don't often know. Like kids don't often tell parents.
Yeah.
So like, what do you do if you think your kid's being bullied but they say nothing, or what do you do
Yeah.
as a
Good
kid if you
question.
don't want to tell anyone?
And so this is channeling Peter, and it's channeling the backpack website. So you can totally go there if you don't remember some of the things I say today. If you're seeing changes, right, that cutting off the braid is a very obvious one, but grades start slipping, there's reluctance to go to school, there's dragging feet getting out the door, things they used to enjoy they don't enjoy anymore, kids that they used to want to spend time with they don't want to anymore. Now it could well be, right, their old friends are also targets of the bullies, right? So I don't want to be in proximity. If you see any changes in behavior that are uncharacteristic, concerning, just ask, hey, what's going on?
Yeah. That's amazing. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
you're welcome.
So you were asking about the consultants on Wonder and what impact they had. I mean, I think everything from the kind of sensitivity training that they did on the first day, to giving feedback on scripts, to giving feedback on staging. Matthew Jaffe's been in the room the entire time, as well as Pam. And I think the best person to train us all really is Garrett himself, who's playing Auggie. And the way that he comes into a room, the way he celebrates others, the way he is in the world. He's much like Auggie in that he's really funny. He's really smart. I think one of the things about what you were saying earlier about not foregrounding disability so much that the personality or character of the subject gets lost. There's a song called Ordinary where he said, I'm just an ordinary kid. I like mint chocolate chip ice cream and playing Frisbee with my dog. There is that, and that's from the book Wonder, just lifted right out. There is that sense that Auggie starts wondering about being an ordinary kid, having ordinary problems, and kind of comes to this speech at the end where he says we're all extraordinary, actually. Getting through sixth grade was an extraordinary feat. And it's always an extraordinary feat to some extent.
Great, beautiful. So as we head to the end of this conversation, let's broaden it a little bit. I mean, till now we've been talking specifically about disabilities and specifically in schools. But let's face it, we're in a time now in society where the need for empathy and compassion are really great in so many parts of society, so many parts of public health. How do we promote empathy and compassion more broadly, whether it's in health or housing or disability policy or so many other areas? Are there some broad principles we can take away that we can apply to other areas? I don't know who wants to start in on this, but I want to hear from each of you. Jason,
So what
go
comes
ahead.
to mind, and this comes from schools, this comes from work culture. So there's this idea of an upstander culture, of look out for the people around you. If something doesn't seem right, look out for them, let people know. Just having that increased awareness and that sense of agency, right? If we empower everybody in this room to look after our neighbors, that's the beginning. And then ideally you marry that with some sense of, we're all in this together. Understanding our differences comes to mind.
Yeah.
We're all humans here. And the idea that we're, a community looking out for each other, I would like to think would be the beginning of that. And it probably needs to start in a school or a workplace.
Right.
It's hard to do that in the city, writ large.
You call that upstander.
Upstander.
Tell us more about that term.
So it's it's a reverse of the idea of a bystander,
Yeah.
right? Often when someone's being victimized, people don't know what to do. They feel powerless. They're standing by.
Right.
The upstander culture is a very proactive reversal of that. No, actually, all of you here are a powerful force that can prevent this. And it's proven to be very effective. There's great science behind it. When you implement this in schools or workplaces, you see dramatic changes and improvement in culture.
That's amazing.
Would love to be able to scale that. I think that's what you're
awesome.
talking about.
Yeah, and in public health, we change what is normal. So if we can change the norm of just watching while bullying goes on without saying anything or doing anything, but move more toward the upstander
Yeah.
situation, like you just described, that creates a new norm for everybody, right?
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
fascinating. Okay. Ari, Sarah, you want to comment more about how we broaden this whole effort to other parts of public health?
So I think it's an interesting challenge, not least because I think at times the goal of trying to introduce compassion as a general universal value can be in tension with the goal of trying to recognize a distinct disability experience, in which the problem is not simple lack of kindness or lack of compassion. It's a fairly long-standing prejudice that is specific to people with disabilities and that's been embedded into our society, and that has a role in that takes the form of public policy very frequently. In terms of the choices we make about what kinds of supports are offered, where there's an expectation for people to go to school, where there's an expectation for people to be participating in the workplace or in their broader communities. And this is, I think, one of the things that we really have to grapple with, because if we want to move the needle for people with disabilities specifically, we have to have public policy that looks at metrics around, are we actually getting people included? How do we create a situation where for a disabled child coming to a new school, in fact, they won't be the first disabled child their classmates have gone to school with. Disability will be part of the norm. If we can do that, we can move the needle on these specific challenges of the disabled experience. That, to me, I think, partially requires us to give up this intense reliance in our society on disability as a universal metaphor for kind of abstract experiences of compassion or kindness, and instead recognize that it's a very distinct experience of a distinct minority that is facing problems that we have not reckoned up to in our society as of yet.
Thank you. Sarah, you want to have the last word?
Well, I do think culture can sometimes help when other systems are failing. I think about this, with climate change, which is not our topic at all, but I remember talking to a journalist who was a deep advocate, for green modalities, and he was so frustrated because no one was listening to facts anymore. So he became a narrative story consultant because he thought there needed to be more climate change stories in the world. And you might say that about kindness. I mean, we have, I'm sorry, but a president who calls a journalist Miss Piggy, and it's okay in the discourse, or like it happens and it's not, there's no repercussion really. So I think in terms of discourse and what's permissible, I do think culture can change us and is a fluid, ever-changing thing. And I think if there are more stories, films, plays, novels, children's plays, children's books that elevate compassion and kindness, that would be great, because we do learn from culture, and theater's a special kind of learning because you embody a character. You literally walk in someone else's shoes. So in Wonder, Jack has a song called Shoes where he imagines walking through all these various shoes, including Auggie's. I think theater's an empathy machine in that way. You literally put on someone else's costume. And they've done studies that empathy has gone down in this population at the same time that reading has gone down. And I think that's no accident, because the empathetic imagination requires you to imagine other people's subjectivity. So I think if we could wean ourselves from tales of violence towards tales that might be quieter, that have gasp-worthy moments of kindness. Like there's this play that won the Pulitzer, Primary Trust, and there's a moment where the whole audience gasps. I kid you not. They go, it's from an act of kindness that was unexpected. So I really credit the writer, the original writer of Wonder, who created a whole movement called Choose Kind, and I think she's done a lot of work in this regard too.
Yeah, my final comment here is in public health we try to look at data and big data and analyze data and do that rigorously, and that's very important, have metrics like Ari mentioned. But oftentimes the way to really move people is to tell stories, right? Like what you've done with Auggie in this show. So thank you so much. So if you're wondering, Wonder will be playing at A.R.T. from December 10th to February 8th. So hope you see it and get to react to it. And Sarah, Jason, and Ari, I want to thank you because this is not an easy topic. It's very, very complex. There are many ways of looking at it. So to have a respectful conversation about how we look at it and look for areas where we can keep the discourse going in the future is I think, a contribution to public health. So I very much enjoyed moderating this. There's going to be a recording of this event on the Harvard Chan YouTube page. And to whet your appetite, as we leave, we're going to play you one more song from Wonder. This one is entitled Moon Boy.
Moon boy, all you do is fly. Moon boy, come down from the sky. Moon boy, there's no need to hide. Helmets to the side. You can take a deep breath. The air is safe to breathe. Moon boy, moon boy. Moon boy, always up in space. Moon boy, how I miss that face. Moon boy, look how far you've come. The battles that you've won. Keep your head held high and show